Good afternoon. I have three quick assignments today, so let me get right to them. First, a word of thanks. Secondly, some context for this celebration. And finally, a few words of introduction of our guest speaker. First, thanks to all of you for joining in this celebration of the life of Dr. Martin Luther King. Thank you to my colleagues in the Speaker Series Committee for helping to arrange this event, to Jack Coyle and his team for helping to publicize and film it, to Sister Helen Marie Burns and her Mercy colleagues who work to fulfill Dr. King's highest hopes every single day, to Tom Fleming, who helped with a lot of the details, to Howard Ferguson, who will MC our question and answer session today, to all our faculty and staff who helped arrange the other 9 stops on Mr. Ross's whirlwind Mount Aloysius College tour, to Elaine Grant, who helped organize the singing event tonight, which we had to cancel because of the weather, in case any of you had that on your calendars. This is the 19th Martin Luther King Day celebration I've been able to be a part of. It's the 3rd at Mount Aloysius College since I came here. I'm grateful that all of these good people I just thanked came together and carried out this important project, and I thank you for that. Second assignment, just a little context for this event. I think we all understand by now that Dr. King's message is universal, it's timeless, it's global. He's best known for his nonviolent campaign against racial injustice in America, but his message resonated far beyond our borders. While his I Have a Dream speech was a wake-up call for a generation in our own country, it has served as a clarion call for peoples all over the globe in the 51 years since he delivered it in the mall in Washington, D.C., standing at the feet of the Lincoln Memorial, looking out at the reflecting pool. Since that day, that speech has been translated into more than 60 languages. It's been shown on the airwaves of more than 120 countries. It has played thousands of times on radio stations all over the globe, and it's been reprinted millions of times, aired, played, and reprinted in places we never imagined. The Dr. King's message is a very personal message at the same time that it's a very global message. And it's a very personal message for all of you. He speaks to each one of you at this college, founded by Sisters of Mercy, women whose leader and founder, Catherine McCauley, devoted her life to caring for the least among us, the homeless, the sick, the distraught, the dispossessed. Dr. King speaks directly to you at this institution where core values of mercy and service, justice and hospitality reign. And as we contemplate the example and the exhortations of Dr. King, we are also mindful on this day of all those in our own country, and indeed from all over the world, people for whom his message was intended, some of whom have fulfilled the dream that he talked about, but many of whom have yet to reach their mountaintop. Dr. King once said that the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution are promissory notes. And we all know that there are still whole parts of our own country, even our own region, where those promissory notes have yet to be delivered on. And our long-term response, not just the commemoration of this day, is the real challenge ahead to all who believe in the fundamental message of Dr. King. And that fundamental message is that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Catherine McCauley felt that way, and her passion for justice in a very real way is the rock on which this college was founded. I want to thank the 579 of our students who lived out Dr. King's legacy just this past summer and fall. These are our Mount Aloysius students who worked on 222 different community service projects with 164 different community partners during that 6-month period. Because of you, Dr. King's words don't just live out today in this commemoration ceremony once every year. His words come to life every day, every time one of you works at the local food bank, or helps out at a homeless shelter, or prepares another person's tax return, or tutors someone else's son or daughter, or collects coats and shoes for children, or grants the wishes of an angel from a Christmas tree, or rebuilds homes in New Orleans, or travels to mission work in Honduras or Guyana. Every time one of our students reaches out to give someone a hand up, every time one of our community reaches into another person's life, every time one of our team stands up for another person's rights, every time you do these things, you are living out Dr. King's mission and helping to fulfill his dream. I'm proud to be at this college for many reasons, but perhaps none more than this reason, how much all of you give back to the communities in which you live. So thank you all for living out Dr. King's legacy so well and so often. Last assignment, a few words about our guest speaker, Mr. Anthony L. Ross. You have a substantial biography of Mr. Ross on the inside page of today's program. Let me highlight just 3 pieces of his story. 1, Tony Ross is a leader in our state. Though still a young man, Tony has been president of the largest network of social service agencies in this Commonwealth, the United Way of Pennsylvania. For most of a decade, he worked directly with that network of 65 local United Ways and with 2 governors, helping to formulate and fund policies designed to lift up the least among us. Tony's work at the United Way addressed the same needs that Dr. King and Catherine McCauley helped to address during their lifetimes. 2, Tony is a leader in our country, not just in our state. He was recently appointed president of OIC America, founded by Reverend Sullivan, which touches the lives of 2.5 million people through 44 programs in 20 states and the District of Columbia, with an action agenda focused on job training and education. He follows in the footsteps of Reverend Sullivan, the Lion of Zion Baptist Church, who was himself a supporter and a friend of both Dr. King and Nelson Mandela. Last fact about Tony, number 3. Tony started out in the same place as many in this room. He is the first in his family to earn a college degree. He is the first in his family to win academic honors at any level, the first to be named president of anything, let alone a nationally respected organization. He grew up in a single-parent family home where he experienced all the challenges of eking out a life and a living in a tough urban environment. I think Tony would tell you that there were 3 keys to his success. 1, he has a great mother, and we're sorry she couldn't be with us today. 2, education always came first in his home. And 3, Tony is a 110%er. Whatever he does it with passion and with compassion. So Tony Ross, we thank you for bringing your passion and your compassion to Mount Aloysius to help us mark this important day in our nation's history. Welcome.
Good afternoon. Now, wait a minute. Now, last night, I had the great privilege of having some dinner with some students. And they told me y'all like to party here. And that y'all can do things like the wobble and the Cupid shuffle and all kinds of dances like that. So I know y'all can do a little better than that. Let's get a real Mount Aloysius. Good afternoon. Awesome, awesome. Well, today's really not about me talking. I just want to give us a little context. I really want to have a conversation, but it is really a pleasure for me to be back here in this region of Pennsylvania. I have a lot of fond memories from my days as United Way of Pennsylvania president of coming to this area. And I want to say, first of all, like any good speaker, you have to know your audience. So I am well aware that I'm in the middle of Steelers country. But in full disclosure, I'm a very rabid Philadelphia Eagles fan. So I hope that you will not hold that against me, the fact that I love the Eagles. In fact, one really true story, I was here in this area several years ago, I think right after the 2006 season, when the Steelers won the Super Bowl, I think against the Seahawks. And the following season, the first game of the year, the folks who were organizing the event didn't realize that the first game was played on a Thursday by the Super Bowl champion, not on a Sunday. So I was scheduled to speak that Thursday. And so I got out here, and people were very apologetic, but they said, hey, get done by kickoff, buddy, or we're all walking out. So I definitely made a big reminder that this area is definitely Steelers country. First and foremost, I want to thank President Foley and his team for the gracious invitation and the hospitality. It's been a wonderful time meeting with members of the Mount Aloysius community over the last 24 hours. I met with some students last night. I got a chance to meet with the Political Awareness Club this morning, and I know at lunch with some athletes, and I'll be meeting with some other students a little bit later this evening as well. So it's been really good. I also want to thank you for that awesome, awesome poster. Amazing. No pressure, Tom. Mandela, King, and Sullivan. Wow. No pressure there, buddy. I have to tell you that I did take a picture of it last night and posted it on Facebook, and at last count, I think I had 128 likes. So just so you know, Mount Aloysius is hot. You guys are popping. As you may or may not know, I had the really distinct honor and privilege of serving as President Foley's vice president at United Way of Pennsylvania when we were together over a decade ago. And I have taken and utilized so many lessons that I learned from President Foley when I was his vice president. Even beyond that, we were friends before we worked together. But I also now take those lessons and utilize those lessons in my current role at OIC. So Tom, I'm so grateful for your friendship, not only today, but for 2 decades. And I look forward to so much continued friendship with you and Michelle and the whole Foley clan. So thank you very much for your leadership. It's my honor and privilege today to serve as one of the keynote speakers at Mount Aloysius' year-long examination of citizenship in the 21st century, the common good. In my view, this is a brilliant, brilliant idea that Mount Aloysius, as a college community encompassing students, faculty, staff, and alumni, chooses a theme annually and coordinates student orientation, first-year seminars, the speaker series, and other events around a single idea. This year-long format certainly is a living representation of citizenship in the 21st century. And it really should come as no surprise that Mount Aloysius would engage in such an activity when you look at the college's mission, which is to respond to individual and community needs with quality programs of education in the tradition of the Religious Sisters of Mercy. This institution was founded on the belief that human beings rely on one another and that the well-being and the importance of community to each individual requires the attention to the common good. In preparation for today's conversation, I read President Foley's op-ed on Constitution Day, which articulated the importance of citizenship in the 21st century. In the piece, President Foley notes that debates about the role and the parameters of citizenship began in ancient times when Greek philosophers struggled with the inherent tensions between the ideas of individual concerns and common good. The op-ed also tells us that Thomas Jefferson erased or smudged out a single word in the early drafts of the Constitution and replaced it with the word citizens. The word that Jefferson removed from the early text was subjects, and it really shouldn't be surprising that that word was removed because individuals who live in a monarchy are by definition subjects of a king or a queen. And as we all know, Jefferson's concept of American democracy is based on the principles of life, liberty, and justice for all. I think one of the points that President Foley was trying to make in his op-ed is that the debate over the role of citizenship is timeless and ever evolving. We live in the age of Google, Facebook, cell phones, iPads, you name it. Yet, we are still contemplating the meaning of ideas such as citizenship that thought leaders such as Aristotle, Plato, Socrates, and Thomas Jefferson debated many, many centuries ago. So today's gathering in honor of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. is another example of the timelessness of the ongoing conversation that we have as a society around the meaning of citizenship. While he was born in 1929, many of the lessons that Dr. King taught us are still relevant today. As a result, it is most appropriate that we gather today, one day after the official MLK Day of Service and national holiday. You might not know that the National MLK Day of Service is designed to empower individuals, strengthen communities, bridge barriers, create solutions to social problems, and move us closer to Dr. King's vision of a beloved community. Our dialogue is also timely today because the King holiday is the only federal holiday that is coordinated by the Corporation for National Service, whose mission is to support the American culture of citizenship, service, and responsibility. And so it's with this context, I want to take a few minutes to outline a few reasons why highlighting citizenship on the King holiday demonstrates the enduring power of the concept of citizenship. Earlier in my remarks, I referenced Thomas Jefferson, who eloquently articulates the values of citizenship and democracy in his writings. Yet, as we all know, Jefferson was a slave owner. So what does it say about the power of the concept of citizenship that we assemble here today in honor of a descendant of slaves and sharecroppers? What does it say about citizenship? I ask you to think about that. What does it say about the power of citizenship when Martin Luther King Jr., a son of segregation and Jim Crow, could still hope and, yes, even dream of a better society? In fact, citizenship was more powerful than the unimaginable horrors of segregation and Jim Crow. And how unimaginable, how horrible it was, let us just look at Dr. King's own words. In the letter from the Birmingham jail, Dr. King described the plight of his times as follows, and I'll paraphrase. We have waited more than 340 years for our constitutional and God-given rights. But when you have seen, perhaps it's easy for those who have never felt the stinging darts of segregation to say, wait. But when you have seen vicious mobs lynch your mothers and fathers at will and drown your brothers and sisters at whim, when you have seen the vast majority of your 20 million Negro brothers smothering in an airtight cage of poverty in the midst of an affluent society, when you suddenly find your tongue twisted and your speech stammering as you seek to explain to your 6-year-old daughter why she can't go to the public amusement park that has just been advertised on television, and you see the tears welling up in her eyes when she is told that Funtown is closed to colored children, when you are humiliated day in and day out by nagging signs that read white and colored, when your first name becomes the N-word, your middle name becomes boy, no matter how old you are, and your last name becomes John, and your wife and mother are never given the respected titles of Mrs., then you will understand why we find it difficult to wait. There comes a time when the cup of endurance runs over, and men and women are no longer willing to be plunged in the abyss of despair. Yet, in light of that lifetime, yet in light of those circumstances, the idea of citizenship allowed Dr. King to hope and dream for a better day for all of us. In his 1962 Emancipation Proclamation Centennial Address, Dr. King said this: "If our nation had done nothing more in its whole history than create just 2 documents, its contribution to civilization would be imperishable. The first of these documents is the Declaration of Independence, and the other is what we are here tonight to honor, the Emancipation Proclamation." Later in that same address, Dr. King said this: "All tyrants, past, present, and future, are powerless to bury the truths in these declarations, no matter how extensive their legions, how vast their power, how malignant their evil." That is the power of citizenship, to transform someone facing those kinds of negative situations, to have that kind of worldview. in my opinion. Dr. King's life journey was really to ensure that America lived up to the lofty aspirations that were espoused by the founding fathers such as Thomas Jefferson. As he said in his famous mountaintop speech, all we say to America is, be true to what you said on paper. And I believe as citizens in the 21st century, our collective responsibility is to work toward a nation that reflects Dr. King's vision of a beloved community in a constantly changing world. Our mission, in my mind, is to work towards a country of opportunity that works for all. And while he would be 85 years old if he were with us today, it's important to remember that Dr. King was a young man. Dr. King was only 26 years old, which is not much older than many of the students here today at Mount Aloysius College, when he burst onto the national scene with Rosa Parks during the Montgomery bus boycotts in 1955. And he was only 39 years old when he was tragically taken from his family and the world on April 4, 1968. These facts bring me to the next reason why I think it's important to discuss the idea of citizenship on the King holiday, and that is young people. Young people change the world, and young people at Mount Aloysius, your time is now. Dr. King once said, time itself is neutral. It can be used either destructively or constructively. And again, I say to all of you here today, Mount Aloysius students, young people change the world, and your time is now. According to Dr. King, change does not roll in on the wheels of inevitability, but comes through continuous struggle. And I would respectfully submit to all of you today that nearly every revolution in terms of politics, religion, technology, business, any aspect of life is rooted in the genius and the activism of young people. Young people change the world, and Mount Aloysius students, your time is now. Dr. King was young, Steve Jobs and Bill Gates were young. When they revolutionized the world, your time is now. If you don't take anything else out of what I had to say today, your time is now. I think another reason to think about citizenship on the MLK holiday is it provides an opportunity to lift up the heroes, past and present, that make a positive difference in society. Oh, excuse me. One of Dr. King's most famous quotes is, everybody can be great because everybody can serve. And so this afternoon, I'm reminded of so many women. I've been talking about a lot of men, but I'm reminded of so many women who have exemplified the concept of citizenship in our society. People like Rosa Parks, who I mentioned, who stood her ground and wouldn't let anybody turn her around on a bus in Montgomery, Alabama, and it ignited the civil rights movement in this country. Someone who you may not be familiar with, Viola Liuzzo, who was not African American, but who was a civil rights worker who was murdered by the Ku Klux Klan in 1965 in Alabama. Fannie Lou Hamer, a very famous voting rights activist and freedom fighter in Mississippi. These are all people that I'm thinking about today who represent citizenship, and we need to remember those folks as well, because in many cases, Dr. King was the face of the movement, but there were so many folks in a collective way to work to make citizenship a reality that expanded that definition. And as I know, I could name so many more, but now I want to take a few moments to talk to you about another shining example of citizenship, a citizenship example that's still relevant today in 2014. And you heard Tom call him the Lion of Zion. He was born 7 years prior to Dr. King in 1922 in West Virginia. Reverend Leon Sullivan, the longtime pastor of Zion Baptist Church in Philadelphia, a civil rights leader, a social activist who was focused on job training opportunities for the poor. In addition, he was an influential leader in the anti-apartheid movement, which eventually won the freedom and release of Nelson Mandela from prison. Again, I say to you, young people change the world. Reverend Sullivan was ordained a Baptist minister at 18 years old. And then, at the age of 36, Reverend Sullivan organized a boycott of various Philadelphia businesses that discriminated against African Americans in hiring. The program became known as selective patronage. The selective patronage program produced thousands and thousands of jobs for African Americans in the city of Philadelphia. The New York Times featured the program as well as Fortune magazine. Again, I say to you young people, you can change the world, and your time is now. Reverend Sullivan was so influential and so successful that in 1962, Dr. King brought Reverend Sullivan to Atlanta to meet with a bunch of ministers about replicating his program. And as a result, Dr. King's organization, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, created Operation Breadbasket, which eventually became the Rainbow Push Coalition, which Reverend Jesse Jackson runs. In 1964, Sullivan founded Opportunities Industrial Centers of America, which is the organization that I now run, in an abandoned jailhouse in Philadelphia. Can you just imagine that visual? You hear a lot of discussion today about the prison complex and the incarceration, mass incarceration of folks. Here is a minister that had the vision to take an abandoned jailhouse and create it into a place of opportunity for people in his community. The OIC program targets individuals with little hope and few employment prospects. The program offers job training and life skills and then helps place graduates into jobs. The OIC movement, as you've heard President Foley talk about, has quickly spread to 44 affiliate programs in 22 states in the District of Columbia. Throughout our history, OIC has served over millions and millions of people, giving them a better life and life-sustaining jobs, family-sustaining jobs. In 1971, Reverend Sullivan became the first African-American to ever sit on the board of a corporate Fortune 500 board. He sat on the board of General Motors. And one of the things that I particularly love about Reverend Sullivan is that his idea and his concept of citizenship expanded beyond America and extended to the globe. So how did Reverend Sullivan utilize his position on the board of General Motors? Well, General Motors was the largest employer of blacks in South Africa. And in 1977, Reverend Sullivan developed the Sullivan Principles, which was a code of conduct for companies operating in South Africa as an alternative to complete disinvestment in the country. And for those of you who may not know, but some of us are familiar with the anti-apartheid movement, at the time there was a real debate in the anti-apartheid movement about how to end apartheid. There were those who felt that apartheid was so evil, so corrupt, that all should divest and leave the country and sort of try to starve apartheid out. On the other spectrum, you had people who believed that it was important to still engage South Africa, to be invested in South Africa, so that you would have money and resources as leverage to try to create change. Well, Reverend Sullivan, the brilliance of his idea, he kind of came in the middle of those two ideas. So what the Sullivan Principles said was, you can engage South Africa, but you have to do it in a way that promotes equality and a better quality of living for all. So what we'd like to do now is show a brief video where Nelson Mandela speaks about the impact of Reverend Sullivan. The Sullivan Principles extended beyond South Africa. They actually became the model for the McBride Principles, which really drove U.S. policy in terms of Northern Ireland. And President Foley, in his career, spent some time in Northern Ireland working for peace and also on Capitol Hill in D.C., and certainly can speak to Reverend Sullivan's impact on the peace process in Northern Ireland. In 1997, Reverend Sullivan created the global Sullivan Principles of Social Responsibility to further expand human rights and economic development to all communities. 2 years later, in 1999, the Global Sullivan Principles were issued at the United Nations in a tremendous honor. This expanded code calls for multinational companies to take an active role in the advancement of human rights and social justice. So we'd like to play you some video from the day that the Global Sullivan Principles were issued at the United Nations. Needless to say, I am truly humbled and honored today to stand on Reverend Sullivan's shoulders as the leader of OIC of America. President Foley asked me to share my personal story regarding the role of citizenship in my life. My story begins just outside of Chester, Pennsylvania, which is a suburb of Philadelphia, and I was born to a single mother. My mother never attended college, and at one point in her life, she was on public assistance. 3 years after my birth, my brother Kyle was born, and we are a blended family, as my brother and I have different fathers. So you know today what most people think about the prospects for success for children who are born under those circumstances. We know what we think about today in 2014 what the prospects of success for those children were in those circumstances. So you can only imagine what people thought the prospects were for my family in the late 1960s and the early 1970s. But thanks to the expanding and ever-evolving notion of citizenship, our family was able to succeed and thrive. My mother was able to get training and secure employment at the BP oil refinery in Marcus Hook. This position allowed her to buy the home and gave her the resources to support my education and my brother's education. It is this ever-evolving definition of citizenship that allowed my mother to improve her quality of life and change the trajectory of her children's lives. Returning to Jefferson and the Founding Fathers for a moment, the Declaration of Independence talks about all men being created equal. Fortunately, many Americans, both male and female, have fought to expand the concept of citizenship to mean all men and women are created equal. And it is without that change in the meaning of citizenship to include women. My mother never has the opportunity to work in a traditionally male job at an oil refinery in the 1970s and the 1980s. The definition of citizenship is always evolving. At one point in this nation's history, African Americans were considered 3/5 of a person. And I'm so grateful for people such as Reverend Sullivan and Dr. King and so many others from all walks of life who fought to expand the meaning of citizenship to include people of color and all Americans. I'm so thankful for the people who stood up for justice and the people who stood up for the principles of complete humanity and full citizenship. Without that change in the meaning of citizenship to include people of color, my mother never has the opportunity to work at BNP and improve her situation in life and give my brother and I a better life. So really, in a very personal way for me, it is precisely the constantly ever-evolving nature of citizenship that has allowed me to pursue my goals, my dreams, my aspirations. The constantly evolving nation of citizenship is how a first-generation college graduate and the eldest son of a single mother in poverty rises to become president of OIC of America and serve as a successor to one of the greatest civil rights leaders in American history. And it's because of citizenship why I have always been driven by the need to advance the common good. I first recognized this need as a summer intern in Philadelphia at a major corporation. And to be frank with y'all, I was miserable. I hated that job. And let me just first say, I don't have anything against corporate America. I don't have anything against making a lot of money. Maybe it was the company, maybe it was me, but it just seemed like corporate America just was not cut out for me. And that's okay for those that it is. But the reality of my story is that my professional journey from the Pennsylvania General Assembly to United Way to OIC has been about improving lives and advancing the common good. And I believe that today Dr. King would challenge us not to exclusively reflect on the past if he were with us. I believe that he would charge us to use this occasion to develop solutions to the pressing issues and challenges of our time. I read something really interesting yesterday as I was preparing for this event. They did a poll on Dr. King, and can you imagine how many people do you think said they had a favorable view of Dr. King? What percentage do you think it was? Take a guess? 94% of Americans say they have a favorable view of Dr. King. But we have to keep this in context. Then I read in 1966, they did a poll on Dr. King. 63% of Americans had an unfavorable view of Dr. King. So it's important that as we deify him now, to understand that he was an agitator. You know, he challenged the status quo. So I say that to say that sometimes citizenship will require you to do things that are unpopular, the things that may cause you some discomfort or may cause others discomfort. Please just keep that in mind. So in the final years of his life, Dr. King expanded his focus from strictly civil rights to include poverty. In one of his last major speeches before his assassination, Dr. King said, "We are challenged to rid our nation and the world of poverty. And unfortunately, Dr. King's focus on economics is still relevant today, as I think all of us know in this room, as our nation continues to struggle with unemployment, poverty, and related issues. We live in a nation with a persistently high unemployment rate, yet there are approximately 3 million jobs that go unfilled. One of the most frustrating things that I encountered as president of the United Way of Pennsylvania, and now as the president of OIC, is that you see all these folks who are unemployed, and then you have employers saying they have jobs, they can't find people to fill them. So we got to work on that, folks. And OIC stands ready to work with all Americans of goodwill to resolve that issue. OIC addresses specific needs of the unemployed, the underemployed, and the underskilled, including people with barriers to employment, with less desirable backgrounds, high school dropouts, teen parents, and other challenges. Our national network offers a range of supports which serve to diminish the impact of personal and social barriers to employment. This year, OIC celebrates its 50th anniversary, and we look forward to many more years of serving communities across America. We are making a statement about citizenship in the 21st century by renewing our commitment to Reverend Sullivan's vision and Dr. King's dream. But we make that statement not just in services to the public, but also in supporting policies and frameworks that strategically integrate the work of community-based organizations such as OIC with educational, economic development, and employer stakeholders. In our view, this alignment would better serve the needs of local economies and a range of job seekers. The bottom line, folks, is poverty is not a partisan issue. And again, the OIC network stands ready to work with anybody from any political background, any part of the aisle to resolve this issue. Finally, I believe that Dr. King would give us one last charge. It was somewhat encapsulated by the music you heard before the program. It's a wonderful praise and worship song that I enjoy called I Give Myself Away. And the lyrics of the song talk about that they give yourself away so that you can be used by a higher power, whether you believe in Jesus or if you believe in another power. So I believe that Dr. King would, in that spirit, would charge us with a charge that he gave in the mountaintop speech the night before he died. And Dr. King said, let us develop a kind of dangerous unselfishness. I'm going to say that again, dangerous unselfishness. Dr. King was recalling the story of the Good Samaritan. And in that parable, some people worried, what will happen to me if I don't help the man in need? And the Samaritan worried, what will happen to the man if I don't help him? Dangerous and unselfish, two words that are not usually associated with each other. Let us strive to live in a state of dangerous unselfishness that promotes citizenship in the 21st century. Thank you very much. I need some water. Good. So, Howard, you want to do that?
On behalf of myself and Mount Aloysius, I would like to thank you for your kind words and your presentation. Great. Presentation today. And I also want to give like a Q&A if anyone have any questions for Mr. Ross. Well, I do have a question personally though.
Okay.
My first question is, what was the similarities of Martin Luther King and Sullivan principles?
Basically, collective action. What they believed in that as individuals, there's only so much you can do to fight systematic injustice. So you have to mobilize the public to create the kind of societal change that you want to give. So if you look at the global Sullivan principles and Sullivan principles, you're talking about getting a group of companies to act in a way to bring economic pressure to force change on a particular government or society. If you look at what King talked about, again, also with the selective prejudice program, getting the general public, folks not to ride a bus, to walk to work. If you've seen the movie The Help, they talk about that, getting folks not to buy from certain businesses, which is really hard because, we want convenience. If you think about that, that takes a real discipline to say, I'm not going to go to that store that's right next to my home because what they're doing is not right. So I would say it's using collective action, whether it be an entity or folks, to exert change on a society or an entity.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the OIC and how it is that they affect the change that they're looking for?
Really what OIC does is we look at the hardest people to employ. When you look a lot of times at workforce development policy, there's a lot of training for people who were at factories and retrain them, community college type folks. But I think one of the issues with poverty in this country, the unfortunate reality is there is sort of this perpetual underclass of folks who have barriers and challenges for whatever reason it might be. We now have had generations of folks who have never had work in their families. So how do you know to go to work? What the basic soft skills. We now, and I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but if you have a felony on your record, it's very hard to get a job in many instances. So the question becomes, well, if those folks aren't able to be employable or make a living, are they going to revert back to crime? So we try to work with those very hard to work with populations and give them the supports to overcome their barriers. So there's a number of training programs. There's a wonderful program at our OIC in Philadelphia that teamed up with the hospitality industry in Philadelphia. And I really like that one because hotels aren't going anywhere. They're not going anywhere. One of the challenges we all know in this country is that businesses are leaving, they're going overseas, they're going from state to state. There are some industries that they're physically located in your community and they're not going anywhere. And hospitality is one. Healthcare is another one. The hospital is not moving to Mexico. So if you can train people in those kinds of jobs that are going to be there long term, those are the kinds of things that we look at as well, just as an example.
Thank you for your words. What frustrates you a lot in trying to get good people to see what you're doing or to join?
Instant gratification. I think this is the challenge of technology in the 21st century. We want it now, Our cell phone ain't moving fast enough, We want it now. There's, a billion channels on cable. So I think it's just getting people to focus and really deal with issues in an in-depth way. We are just such an instant society, and a lot of these issues, they're just not instant issues, and you got to dig in on them. And I think that's particularly frustrating for me to try to find that balance because you have to meet people where they are, and that's very difficult.
Tony, you talked a little bit about your experience at Franklin Marshall, being a student in a largely all-white and somewhat rural area, which speaks a lot to our experience here. What can you say to all of us about that experience that would be helpful as we try to move together with greater diversity, greater appreciation for one another and difference?
I would say that you guys are all one community. This is why you said we're all one F&M community, but they're different communities. And I used to say in our own experience at Franklin and Marshall, yes, we are all Franklin and Marshall, but there's different types of F&Ms. That one F&M is comprised of many different F&Ms. And so I think the more that you can accept that everyone here contributes to what is the essence of Mount Aloysius, I think that will bring a culture of greater acceptance and tolerance. Like I always say, no one group has a monopoly on talent and brilliance, and no one group should have a monopoly on what is the essence of Mount Aloysius. All of you collectively bring together what makes this place special. And I think if you come at it from that perspective, I think it will help in this kind of environment. Thank you so much, folks.
First, let me thank Tony for coming to our mountaintop to tell us the story of how he got to his mountaintop. And we appreciate, Tony, your coming here. He came here from his old college. Tony was asked yesterday at their Martin Luther King event to be the person that introduced the president of Franklin and Marshall, and I was honored as the president of our college, to be able to introduce him. And we're so grateful that you came here, Tony. Thank you. And now I would like to ask one of our special talents at Mount Aloysius if she would lead us in the closing song.
Hello, everybody. On the back of your programs, there's a song called Lift Every Voice and Sing. Most of, I know growing up myself in rural Ohio, this song was very important in our Martin Luther King Day celebrations at church, at other organizations that I might have been involved with, things like that. And so I will sing along, but I cannot do it by myself. I think that for all of us to sing would really exemplify what Dr. King was talking about. So if you wouldn't mind standing and follow along, that'd be great. Thank you. Okay. Are you doing it? Okay. Okay, good. But if you want to continue singing along, please feel free.